He laughed. My son actually laughed when I told him I still had savings. Not a chuckle, not a grin. A full, head-thrown-back, dismissive laugh, like I'd said something adorably naive. I just stood there in my own kitchen, holding the cup of coffee I'd made for him, and listened to my own child mock the idea that his 74-year-old mother might still have control over her life. "Mom," he said, shaking his head, "you don't need to worry about money anymore. That's what family is for. We've got you covered now. Right, Cassie?" His wife didn't look up from her phone. She just made a sound that could have meant anything. Agreement. Indifference. Boredom. Jason had come by under the pretense of checking in on me, but in reality, it was about the same thing as always. Money. This time, it was something about a new company his friend was starting. A can't-miss opportunity, he called it. He didn't ask if I wanted to invest. He assumed I would. Like always. I didn't answer right away. Just sipped my coffee and looked at the man across from me. My son. The boy I'd raised through night shifts and exhaustion, through my husband's slow illness, and then the sudden emptiness that followed. The boy who once clung to my hand on the first day of school now sat in my kitchen making jokes at my expense. "How much do you think I have, Jason?" I asked him quietly. He smirked. "Mom, you sold that little place for what, 60 grand? That's nothing now. You're not sitting on some secret fortune. Don't worry. I'll make sure you're taken care of." 60 grand? He thought I sold the laundromat for 60 grand. I didn't correct him. An hour later, after they left, Cassie barely said goodbye. I did the dishes in silence. My hands worked automatically, my mind somewhere else. Not on their request, not even on his laugh. On the bank call I'd gotten last week, a quiet-voiced man named Philip had introduced himself as the senior manager overseeing my portfolio. He wanted to confirm a few changes to my accounts. According to the system, someone had submitted a request to alter account ownership, make Jason the primary. Only they'd made a mistake. I was still listed as the main account holder. Everything was still mine. I'd thanked Philip, told him no changes were authorized, and asked him to flag any further requests. That had been 7 days ago. Jason didn't know yet. He thought he was in charge, thought I was some old woman with a little left over, thought he could laugh in my kitchen and walk out with my future in his pocket. I dried the last plate slowly, then opened the drawer by the sink. Inside, my notebook, blue leather, barely worn. I hadn't touched it in years. I opened to a blank page and wrote in careful ink, October 3rd. Jason laughed. Philip called. I'm still the main account holder. Then I underlined the word still. Just once. Then again. I didn't sleep that night. Not out of anger, though God knows there was enough of that boiling under the surface, but because something had shifted. For the first time in years, I felt awake. Not just out of bed, not just upright, not just functioning. Awake. Present. Like someone who could still make decisions that mattered. The next morning, I brewed tea instead of coffee. Earl Grey, strong. I sat by the kitchen window, notebook open beside me, and thought about the call from the bank. "Mrs. Ellison," Philip had said, polite but firm, "I'm obligated to inform you that someone, we believe a family member, submitted forms requesting to be designated the primary on your accounts. They filled in your son's information. Jason Ellison." I'd nearly dropped the phone. "He listed himself as your financial caretaker," Philip added. Caretaker. That word settled in my throat like dust. "And what does the system say?" I had asked. "You're still the main holder," he'd replied. All authorizations require your signature. Nothing has been changed. I flagged the account for security and wanted to confirm. He hadn't sounded surprised. Probably wasn't the first time he'd made that kind of call. Now, sitting in my quiet kitchen, I reached for my checkbook. I hadn't used it in a while. The balance was still printed on the last stub, $431,876. Jason didn't know. He had no idea I'd sold the laundromat for nearly $500,000. I let him believe what he wanted because believing the truth would have put me back on the menu. His menu. Just another resource to tap. When Harold died, it had taken me 4 years to decide what to do with the place. Every bolt, every wall, every folding station had his hands on it. But eventually, I sold it to a young couple. Immigrants. Hard-working, with 2 kids and a dream. They still send me Christmas cards. Jason thought I'd barely broken even. I looked around the house, modest, clean, the same floral wallpaper I'd put up in '93 still curling in the corners. No luxury. No signs of wealth. That was deliberate. He stopped seeing me long ago. He saw what he wanted. A widow, a small pension, a paid-off house. An easy target. I pulled out the file folder from the cabinet above the fridge, labeled Family, underlined in red. I'd kept every major receipt for 30 years. Jason's college tuition, the down payment for their first home, their second. Medical bills when Cassie had complications with her second pregnancy. Loans for their failed cafe. Another business that went nowhere. Tens of thousands. I ran my hand across the pages, each one a piece of me they never returned. I could have called him right then, asked why, demanded an apology. But what would that change? Instead, I picked up the phone and called the bank. "Philip," I said when he answered, "I'd like to schedule a meeting, in person." "Of course, Mrs. Ellison. Any specific concerns?" "Yes," I said, voice steady. "I want to make sure no one ever tries to replace me on my own accounts again." There was a pause, then a hint of something in his tone. Respect, maybe. "I'll make sure we take care of that." The bank building hadn't changed much. Same stone facade, same dusty awnings that sagged a little in the middle. I parked across the street and sat in the car for a few minutes, watching people come and go. Young couples, professionals in neat coats, a woman pushing a stroller with one hand and tapping on her phone with the other. I waited until no one was looking before I stepped out. I didn't want to be noticed. That had become a habit over the years. Staying small, invisible, letting people think they understood me, that I was harmless. Philip greeted me at the front desk, younger than I'd imagined. Mid-30s, maybe. Crisp shirt, tie slightly loosened like he was trying not to seem too formal. He shook my hand with both of his, warm and firm. "Mrs. Ellison," he said, "thank you for coming in." I followed him to a small glass office at the back. No window, just one framed print of a mountain range and a fern in the corner that looked fake but wasn't. He gestured for me to sit. "I reviewed your account this morning," he began, pulling up a screen I couldn't see. "You've been with us for over 38 years. Impressive consistency." "Consistency is underrated," I replied. He smiled faintly. "You were right to be concerned. The forms your son submitted weren't just to add himself as a contact. He requested full financial authority, power of attorney, account control, card access, everything." I didn't flinch. I'd already guessed. Still, hearing it aloud did something cold and permanent to my chest. "He assumed I wouldn't notice," I said. Philip nodded. "We declined the request, of course. Because your signature is required, and your authority hasn't been revoked. You're still the sole primary on every account, investment, and trust. The only reason we even saw the forms was because of the security flag on your profile. You activated that 5 years ago during the sale of the laundromat. I remembered. The woman who bought the business had warned me gently. Family gets funny around money. You might want to set some locks in place. Turns out she was right. I'd like to make some changes, I told him. Philip opened a drawer, pulled out a folder. We can update beneficiary access, remove secondary card holders, restrict online requests, whatever you need. I reached into my purse, pulled out a folded paper. This is a list of every account I want locked down. No joint access, no linked cards, no exceptions. He took it, read quickly, then looked up. And the trust? What trust? You have a dormant family trust, he said, checking his screen. Established 10 years ago, never activated. It names your son and his children as beneficiaries. If you'd like to dissolve or modify... I want it revoked, I said flatly. Philip raised an eyebrow. Completely? I met his eyes. Every word of it. I'll be setting up a new one, with a different beneficiary. He didn't ask who. He didn't need to. He only nodded. Let's get started. The house was too quiet when I got home. Not peaceful, quiet, like a held breath. Like it was waiting to see what I'd do next. I set my purse down on the entry table and took off my coat, folding it over the chair the way Harold used to. It still smelled faintly of lavender and dust, the kind of scent no one notices until there's no one left to smell it. In the kitchen, I boiled water and stood by the counter while it hissed. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't even feel angry, not in the way I'd expected. What I felt was tired. Not the kind of tired a nap fixes. Tired like something old in my bones had just turned to stone. I sat at the table with my tea, pulled the folder from my purse, and opened it slowly. Bank forms, trust paperwork, authorization removals. Each page had my name in clean, dark print at the top. Martha E. Ellison, not Jason's mother, not the woman who funded a life. Just me. I stared at that for a long time. It's strange how easily a name becomes an afterthought when people stop using it. My son hadn't called me Martha since he was a child. Then again, he rarely called me anything lately, except when he needed something. Mom? When he wanted softness. Mother? When he wanted control. I flipped to the second page. There it was. Account holder status. Updated. All secondary access removed. Beneficiaries nullified. Clean. Legal. Done. I felt like I should have cried, but nothing came. Instead, I got up, went to the hallway closet, and pulled down the old accordion file that hadn't been touched in years. Inside were records. Not the financial ones. The human ones. Photos, letters, report cards, drawings, a paper turkey Jason made when he was 6. I'm thankful for Mommy's pie, it said in red crayon. I traced the words with my finger. When had it changed? Not overnight, no. These things never happen like lightning. They happen like rust. A little neglect, a little assumption, a little turning away. Until one day, you wake up and realize you've been quietly erased from your own life. The erasing had started small. The first time I wasn't invited to the school play because they forgot. The time they moved to a bigger house and never gave me the new address, just said, we're staying in the area. The holidays that became too busy to host. Then came the favors. The loans. The help. The desperate calls that always came with warmth and urgency and silence afterward. And every time I said yes. I said yes because that's what mothers do. Because I thought that was love. But I was wrong. Love doesn't look like silence. It doesn't look like invisibility. It doesn't look like a son laughing in your face when you say you still have savings. I tucked the turkey drawing back in its place and stood there, holding the file like a fragile thing. Then the doorbell rang. For a moment, my heart skipped. I thought, just briefly, it might be Jason. That maybe something had shifted. That maybe he'd realized what he was doing. But it wasn't him. It was Cassie. She stood on my porch in an oversized jacket and dark glasses, the kind you wear when you don't want to be recognized. Her lips were pressed together in that tight, polite way she'd always had. "Hi, Martha," she said, using my name for the first time in years. "Do you have a minute?" I looked at her, looked through her, and I nodded. I didn't say welcome. I didn't say come in. I just stepped aside and let her pass. Cassie walked in like someone approaching a crime scene, cautious, careful, eyes scanning everything as if the walls might accuse her. She had a small leather purse slung over her shoulder, and I noticed, as always, that her nails were perfectly done. Pale pink, glossy, flawless. It used to bother me, the way she always looked so composed, so in control. Now I understood it differently. Control was her currency. She built her entire life around it. Marrying my son was part of that. And I had been part of the bargain too. Silent, useful, forgettable. "I know this is awkward," she started, setting her purse gently on the edge of the table. "But I thought maybe we could talk. Just clear the air a little." I didn't answer. I walked to the stove, refilled the kettle, turned the burner on. I moved slowly, not out of pettiness. I just wanted her to feel the space between her words and my silence. She took the chair opposite mine at the table and crossed her legs neatly, the same way she had that day, 15 years ago, when she came to tell me they were moving into a larger house and could I help with the down payment just until Jason's bonus came through. Spoiler, the bonus never did. "Jason's been a little stressed lately," she said after a moment. "This business idea, the house expenses, you know how it is. We've all been feeling stretched." The way she said we told me everything. She hadn't come for reconciliation. She'd come for damage control. The kettle began to rumble. "You always said you wanted to help us build something lasting," she continued. "That's what this new company is about. It's not just some silly startup. It's about legacy." Legacy. That word sat on the table between us like a wet rag. "You filed paperwork to take control of my accounts," I said evenly, not turning around. There was a pause. We thought it would be easier," she said, "in case anything happened. Jason just wanted to be able to manage things more efficiently. You know, if you ever got sick." I turned then, looked her in the eyes. "I'm not sick." "I know," she said quickly. "Of course. But, well, eventually you might be." There it was. The future she had planned for me. Not one with me in it, but one where I'd be tidily managed. Filed away. Turned into a line item. I poured water into 2 cups and set one in front of her. She didn't touch it. "You were hoping I wouldn't notice," I said. "That I'd just sign whatever you put in front of me." "Martha," she said, offering a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "That's not fair." "No," I said. "What's not fair is that I gave your children birthday presents every year, paid for your dental implants, covered your hospital bills after you had Ava, sat alone for 3 Thanksgivings while you were at your sister's. And still, somehow, you believed you had the right to plan the end of my life like a real estate transaction." The words didn't come out bitter. They came out calm, like facts being logged in a ledger. Cassie stiffened. We weren't trying to hurt you, but you weren't trying to see me either. She looked away, jaw tight. There was a long silence. Then she straightened, pulled something from her purse. A thick envelope. She slid it across the table. What's this? Documentation, she said. For the business. Jason thought maybe you'd reconsider. There's a potential investor meeting in a few weeks, and your support would... She trailed off. I didn't touch the envelope. You know what the bank told me? I said after a moment. That you listed Jason as my financial caretaker, as if I were no longer capable of handling my own life. Her lips parted, but I didn't let her speak. Cassie, if you came here hoping to salvage something, you've misread the situation. I'm not angry. I'm not even disappointed. I'm just done. Her mouth closed. I pushed the envelope back toward her. She didn't take it. There's nothing left for you in this house, I said. I've made my decisions. She stood slowly, as if trying to retain dignity, gathered her purse, tucked the envelope back inside it. I'll tell Jason you're not interested, she said quietly. Tell him whatever you like, I replied. He'll figure it out soon enough. She paused at the door, hand on the knob, and for a second, I thought she might say something honest, something real. But instead, she said, You'll regret this. I smiled. No, I said. For the first time in a long time, I don't think I will. The phone didn't ring that night. Not once. No frantic call from Jason. No angry text from Cassie. No half-hearted apology masked as concern. Just silence. A silence that spread through the house like an old familiar quilt. Heavy, a little itchy, but mine. I went to bed early, not because I was tired, but because I wanted to lie still in that quiet. To hear what the absence of noise really sounded like. It wasn't peace exactly, but it was something close. When I woke, it was still dark outside. I made oatmeal, with cinnamon, the way I like it. No one ever remembers that I prefer it with cinnamon. Not Jason, not the grandkids. They make it with sugar or berries or call it old-fashioned if I ask for it a certain way. The taste this morning was sharp, perfect. By 10, I had tidied the house, swept the back porch, paid a utility bill online, checked my investments. Those I still controlled fully, thanks to yesterday's paperwork. Then I opened the hallway closet and pulled down a dusty box labeled Mementos. Inside were things I hadn't looked at in years. Jason's birth certificate, a yellowing hospital bracelet, his kindergarten photo with that uneven bowl haircut I gave him in the bathroom because we couldn't afford a barber that month. He cried, and I cried after, and Harold just kissed us both on the forehead and said, well, he'll learn humility early. A letter Jason wrote me at 19 when he was off at university and missing home. Thanks for everything, Mom, it said. I wouldn't be here without you. He'd even drawn a tiny cartoon of me in the corner, my glasses too big, a pot on the stove. I folded the letter gently and placed it on the table beside my tea. I wasn't looking for reasons to forgive, but I needed to remember that love had once lived here. Even if it had left quietly through the back door when money came in through the front. Around noon, I heard the faint buzz of my phone on the counter. Ava, my granddaughter. She rarely called. Too busy. Too loud. Too busy being 17. I answered. Hi, Grandma. Her voice was bright, forced. Just wanted to check in, see how you're doing. I smiled into the receiver. What a nice surprise. Is everything all right? Oh, yeah, totally, she said quickly. I just thought, maybe I could stop by later. Just hang out for a bit? I stirred my tea. That would be lovely. Pause. I mean, if you're not busy. Another pause. Ava, I said gently, did your father send you? The silence said everything. No, she said. Too late. I chuckled, not unkindly. It's all right, sweetheart. You can come by anyway. I made cookies while I waited. Not the frozen kind, real ones, with real butter and the cheap chocolate chips that melt too fast and taste like childhood. She arrived just after 2, carrying a paper bag and wearing that nervous energy teenagers wear like perfume. She hugged me tightly, and I let her. I didn't ask anything. I just fed her cookies and poured milk and asked how school was. She talked. I listened. At one point, her face changed. Grandma, she said, frowning, Dad's freaking out. I think something's going on with the bank. I nodded. Yes, something is. She watched me carefully. He tried to take control of my accounts, I said. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Seriously? I was never confused about what he wanted. I just let it go for a long time. She looked ashamed. I didn't know, I swear. I just thought you liked helping. I did, I said, until it stopped being help and started being expected. She pushed her cookie around on the plate. He's mad at you? Says you're being unreasonable. I smiled again. I know. I think he's scared, she said. About money, about losing whatever it is he thinks he had. I reached across the table and took her hand. Honey, I said, he never lost it. He just forgot what it was. Ava looked at me with wide eyes, and for a second, I saw Jason's face again. The good version. The boy who once drew me in the margins of a letter. What are you going to do now? She asked. I already did it, I said softly. Then I got up and pulled a second file folder from the shelf. This one fresh, a name printed neatly on the front. Ava J. Ellison, Educational Trust. I laid it on the table between us. She stared at it like it was glowing. I don't understand, she whispered. You will, I said. One day. And she would. By the time Jason called, it was nearly 9 p.m. I let it ring. Twice. The third time, I picked up. Mom, he said, sharp and breathless, like I'd been avoiding him, like I was the one who owed him something. What the hell is going on? I didn't say anything. I just got off the phone with the bank, he snapped. They said you revoked all access. Froze the trust. Canceled the co-authorization. Yes, I said. That's right. The silence on his end wasn't shock. It was fury being swallowed. You can't just do that without talking to me first, he said. We had a system. This affects more than just you, you know. I'm aware. He took a breath, clearly trying to sound reasonable. Mom, come on. Let's not do this. I didn't mean anything by the paperwork. It was just easier. You've said yourself that banking stuff overwhelms you sometimes. No, I said. You said that. I just let you believe it. He paused. I could hear something in the background. Cassie's voice, maybe, or the hum of a television. Then he lowered his voice. I don't understand why you're doing this now. Out of nowhere. Out of nowhere, I repeated. Jason, I could give you a list. Want me to start at 2002 or 1989? He sighed, heavy and theatrical. Look, I get it. You're upset. Maybe we haven't always done things perfectly. But this kind of retaliation, it's not you. I sat a little straighter. It is now. He didn't respond right away. You've always said you wanted to help the family, he said finally. Isn't that what this is all supposed to be for? I do want to help the family, I said. So I've decided to help the part that still sees me as family. That landed. I could hear the slap of it over the line. You mean Ava? He said bitterly. I mean whoever remembers I'm a person, not a wallet. He muttered something I couldn't catch. Then, louder, you're going to regret this. If you cut us off, there's no coming back from that. Jason, I said. I regret every time I said yes when I wanted to say no. Every time I sat through Cassie's silent disapproval. Every time you dropped off the kids like I was the help and didn't even ask how I was doing. You're rewriting history. No, I said. I'm just finally reading it clearly. You're being cruel. I almost laughed. I'm being clear. That's different. His tone changed then, a last attempt at charm. That soft, wheedling tone he used to use as a teenager when he wanted the car keys. Come on, Mom. Don't let a little paperwork get in the way of everything we've built. You mean everything I built? That hit harder than anything else I'd said. Because it was true. I'd built the life he stood on, and now I was taking my name off the blueprints. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, coldly. Fine. If that's how you want to play it. This isn't a game, I said, and hung up. My hand didn't even shake. The next morning, I went back to the bank. Philip was waiting for me again, and this time, I brought cookies. Oatmeal raisin. He smiled when he saw the tin. You didn't have to do that, he said. I know, I replied. But I wanted to. There's a difference. We reviewed the trust documents, double-checked the beneficiary changes, and finalized the revocations. Everything was now airtight. Jason and Cassie were out. Ava was in. Last thing, I said, handing him one more envelope. He opened it, brows lifting. A notarized letter. My new will. He looked up at me. You're sure? Positive. He nodded. We'll file it today. As I turned to leave, he stopped me. Mrs. Ellison, he said, I've worked here 12 years. I've seen people change their plans in a panic, out of spite, out of anger. But you... He paused. You're doing this with peace. That's rare. I smiled. I'm not angry, I said. I'm just finally done being erased. He held the door open for me. Outside, the air smelled like wood smoke and rain. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like the world had made space for me again. That night, I didn't reach for the TV remote. I didn't scroll through the news or listen to the local radio station with the voice that always seemed too cheerful for real life. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table, lights dimmed, and opened Harold's old recipe journal. It still smelled faintly of graphite and oregano. He used to scribble notes next to every recipe, things like too much garlic for Martha, or Jason prefers without onion, don't forget. His handwriting leaned forward like it was in a hurry, like it had something important to say before the page ended. I ran my fingers down the margin of one page. Chicken pot pie, revised 1983. I remembered that day. Jason had been 8, the kind of clingy that warmed your heart and drove you mad at the same time. He'd stood on a stool next to Harold, mixing carrots with a spoon twice the size of his hand. That was the last winter we still fit at the small kitchen table, before the remodel, before the ambition, back when we were enough. I closed the book and leaned back in my chair. There was no sadness tonight, just stillness, a kind of silence that felt earned. And then, just before 10, the phone buzzed again. One new voicemail. I hadn't even heard it ring. I pressed play. Mom. It's me. Jason's voice, but slower this time. No anger, no bluster, just the kind of tired you can't fake. I know you're mad, or hurt, or both. I deserve that. I get it now. Or I'm starting to. I I didn't think it mattered. Not the money, I mean. I just thought we were all on the same team, and I didn't realize how far I'd pushed you. A breath. You were always just there. And I guess I started treating that like a fact, not a gift. Another pause. I could hear him moving, pacing maybe. I don't know what to say that wouldn't sound like manipulation. You're too smart for that, always have been. I just, look, if you ever want to talk, I'm here. Click. I didn't move, didn't delete it either. I let the silence return and stayed there a while, staring at nothing, thinking of everything. The next day, the mail came early. The usual clutter. A glossy flyer for new windows I didn't need. A retirement magazine with a smiling couple on the cover. She had pearl earrings. He had thick white hair. Both lies, I thought. No one smiles like that at 80, not without dentures and a very good sense of denial. Then I saw it. A plain envelope. No return address, but postmarked from Boston. I knew immediately. My niece, Rachel. Inside, a folded letter written by hand. She always wrote in that neat, slanted script that looked like it belonged on wedding invitations. Dear Aunt Martha, I hope this reaches you well. I've been thinking about our last phone call, about how tired you sounded, even though you tried to hide it. I wanted to say something I never got around to back then. Thank you. Not just for the help you gave Mom when she was sick, or the money you sent for my tuition, but for the way you made us feel like we still belonged somewhere, even when everything else was falling apart. I think about those summers in your kitchen, the way you made space for us, not just physically, but emotionally, like we weren't just visiting, we were home. I don't know what's happening between you and Jason, and I won't pretend to understand. But if you ever need a place to go or someone to sit with you in the silence, I'm here. Love always, Rachel. I sat with that letter in my lap for a long time. Jason's voice still lingered in my mind. So did Rachel's. Both true. Both in some quiet way, trying. I didn't feel conflicted. I felt complete. They'd both remembered me, finally. Not the money, not the help. Me. That afternoon, I took the car out for a drive. Not to go anywhere in particular, just to feel the road again, feel the town I'd spent my whole life in. Maple Street looked smaller now. The bakery was gone. The florist replaced by a vape shop. The high school now had solar panels and fences. But my house was still my house. I pulled into the driveway with the sun hitting the windshield just right. For a moment, I saw my reflection. Older, yes, and softer around the eyes. But not gone. Not erased. Not the caretaker of someone else's story. I turned off the engine and whispered aloud, "You'd be proud of me, Harold." And for the first time in years, I believed it. Ava looked down at her hands. They were trembling slightly. Whether from nerves or cold, I couldn't tell. I reached over and pulled the blanket from the back of the couch, draped it over her knees like I used to when she was a little girl coming in from the snow, nose red, eyes bright. She didn't look up. "I don't know what's going to happen," she said. "With Dad, with everything. But I didn't want to be at home today. I wanted to be here." "That's a choice," I said softly. "And it's yours. That matters." She nodded. Still didn't lift her head. We sat like that for a while. The clock ticked. The house creaked. Outside, the wind pushed leaves across the porch in slow, scraping arcs. Eventually, Ava looked up. "Grandma, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Were you always this strong?" It caught me off guard. Not because of the question, but because of the way she asked it. with genuine wonder, like she'd just noticed something that had been in front of her the whole time. I smiled, a little crooked. No, I was often afraid. I just didn't let fear decide for me. But you let them, Dad, Cassie, treat you like you didn't matter. I didn't answer right away. Sometimes, I said finally, love makes you quiet. You tell yourself it's patience, understanding, grace, but eventually you realize it's erasure. And that kind of love? I paused. That's not love at all. That's just fear in a nice dress. She let out a breath, long and slow. I'm sorry, she said suddenly. For what, darling? For not seeing it sooner. For going along with things. For only coming around when it was convenient. I reached over, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. You were a child. You were being raised in a house where love came with expectations and strings. That's not your fault. Ava's eyes glistened. She blinked quickly, as if ashamed of the emotion rising in her. You didn't just say no, she whispered. You rebuilt your whole life in a week. No, Ava, I said gently. I didn't rebuild anything. I just took back the parts that were mine all along. Later that afternoon, she helped me in the garden. The sun had finally broken through the clouds, casting gold over everything. We pulled weeds, planted bulbs I'd meant to get to in the spring. I watched her hands in the dirt. Careful, deliberate, kind. So much like her grandfather's. Harold always said the best thing about gardening was that it required both hope and humility. Maybe that's why I'd always come back to it. At one point, Ava looked up from where she was kneeling beside the flower bed. Do you think people really change? I thought about that for a while. I think they reveal themselves, I said. Sometimes what we call change is just clarity. She nodded, like she understood. When we went inside, I made lemonade, the tart kind, the way she liked it. We sat at the table, sun-warmed and quiet, sipping from mismatched glasses. Ava pulled something from her bag, a small notebook frayed at the edges. I've been writing things down, she said. About this, about everything. I don't know what it is yet. A journal, maybe. Or just a way to remember. I smiled. You're documenting your own awakening. She flipped to the last page. Can I read you something? Please do. She cleared her throat, then began. My grandmother used to be a shadow, always in the background, always reliable, always quiet. But now I see her for what she is. A storm that chose to stay still, a force that let everyone else call her calm. Until one day, she remembered she had thunder in her bones. And then she stood up. My throat tightened. I couldn't speak. I reached across the table, took her hand. She held mine like she wasn't afraid of its frailty, like she understood that strength sometimes looks like paper-thin skin and a voice that refuses to tremble. She didn't say anything more. She didn't need to. That evening, after Ava left, I sat on the porch, wrapped in an old cardigan. Harold had once joked, made me look like a librarian in mourning. The air smelled of earth and wood smoke, and a few stars had already blinked into the sky. The house behind me glowed soft and yellow, the kind of light that makes you feel like you've done something right with your life, even if only for a moment. I was shelling peas. Not because I needed to. I could have just as easily opened a can. But because the rhythm of it calmed me. Pop, peel, toss. Pop, peel, toss. There's a kind of quiet wisdom in doing things the long way. It reminds you you're still capable of patience, even after the world's forgotten your name. Then the phone rang again. I let it go once, twice. The third time, I picked it up without checking the screen. Hello? Silence. Then, Mom. Jason again. His voice was different this time. Not angry, not defensive, not charming. Just flat. Tired. Hi, Jason, I said calmly. I know I shouldn't be calling again. You made your position clear. I waited. He cleared his throat. I've been thinking about what you said, about what I said. Good. I talked to the bank again. They confirmed everything. The trust is gone. The access is revoked. Everything. I didn't respond. There was nothing to add. It wasn't a threat. It was just a fact. He sighed. Cassie's furious. Says you've lost your mind. Says this is some kind of vendetta. I laughed quietly. It's not a vendetta, Jason. It's a boundary. First time I've ever really set one with you. I know. He hesitated. And I think maybe that's why it hurts so much. That caught me off guard. For a moment, I softened, but I didn't let it reach my voice. What do you want, Jason? Another pause. I guess I just want to understand how we got here. When did I stop being your son and start being your opponent? That's the wrong question, I said gently. The right one is, when did I stop being your mother and start being your resource? He didn't argue. I'm not saying I was perfect, he said after a long silence. I know I wasn't. No, you weren't, I said, and neither was I. But I loved you in ways that cost me, and you stopped noticing. More silence. He wasn't used to being on the receiving end of hard truths. I don't think anyone in his life told him no without a smile and a loophole. I didn't mean to treat you like that. I believe you, I said, but meaning isn't the same as doing. He exhaled, a sound like deflation. What now? Are we just done? No, I said, but I'm done being quiet. I'm done being erased. So this is it? You're cutting us off? I'm cutting me free, I said. There's a difference. He was quiet again, and for the first time, I didn't feel the need to fill the silence. Let him sit in it. Finally, he asked, Can I come by tomorrow? Just me? It surprised me, but not entirely. You can, I said, but not to talk about money or paperwork or the past. If you come, it's to sit, to drink tea, to peel apples if I ask you. Can you do that? I think so, he said softly. Then you're welcome. I ended the call before he could say anything else. The next morning, he came. No fanfare, no pretense. He knocked, once, lightly. And when I opened the door, he looked smaller. Not just physically, though his shoulders did sag. He looked like a man who'd finally realized he was capable of doing harm. He brought nothing with him. That was a good sign. No contracts. No peace offerings dressed up as obligation. I brought these, I said, holding up a basket of apples from the back garden. He nodded. We sat at the kitchen table. I handed him the peeler. He took it without a word, and we peeled apples. In silence. Like people who had known each other once, and maybe still could. When he left an hour later, he didn't ask for anything, didn't try to justify or defend or fix. He just hugged me, the way he used to when he was too young to have pride yet, and said, Thanks for letting me come. I watched him walk to his car, and for the first time in a very long time I thought, maybe there's still a path forward. Not to what we were, but to something new. Something chosen. It was nearly a week before I heard from Cassie again. I wasn't expecting a call. I thought she might stay silent, let Jason do the slow crawl back toward civility on his own. But Cassie was never the kind of woman to let others clean up messes she considered hers to manage. Not because she cared about harmony, but because she cared about optics. When the phone rang and her name flashed across the screen, I debated letting it ring out. But I was done with avoidance. Done pretending I wasn't home or that my hands were full. Done playing the role of the passive matriarch. I answered. Cassie. A pause, then Martha. Her voice was composed, as always, clipped at the edges. I imagine Jason told you he came by. He did. Another pause. I suppose I should start by saying, I didn't mean for things to escalate like they did. The bank. The trust. That was never intended to feel like a coup. I raised an eyebrow, though she couldn't see me. No? Then what was it intended to feel like? She sighed. That kind of sigh reserved for people who believe they've been patient long enough. I thought we were building something as a family. A future. It made sense, legally and financially, to shift things. To remove me from my own accounts? I thought you trusted us, she said, quietly now. I thought we were aligned. I took a long breath, held it, then let it go. No, Cassie. What you thought was that I wouldn't notice, or if I did, I wouldn't do anything about it. She didn't respond. You believed, as many do, that old means soft, that time dulls our senses, that gratitude means silence. You were wrong. She still didn't speak. I'm not angry anymore, I continued. That ship sailed when I walked out of the bank holding the documents you tried to bury me under. But I am done. Done with the pretending. Done with the giving without acknowledgement. Done being the quiet shadow at the edge of your comfortable little kingdom. That's not fair, she said sharply, finally breaking. You're making me sound like a villain. There are no villains, I said evenly. Just choices. And consequences. I was trying to protect our family. No, I said. You were trying to protect your control over it. The line went silent again. Then her voice, clipped, brittle. So that's it? You're cutting us out? You already did that, I said gently. You just didn't think I'd notice. She hung up without another word. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean. 2 days later, Ava came over again. This time with muffins, still warm, with cinnamon crumble on top. She didn't say they were store-bought, and I didn't ask. We ate them on the porch, listening to the wind rustle through the trees. It was the kind of morning that felt like a blessing. Quiet, steady, gently alive. I think Dad's changing, she said eventually. Maybe, I said. Maybe he's remembering. She looked at me, confused. Remembering what? That I'm not a satellite, I said. Not a planet orbiting his life. She smiled, broke off a piece of muffin, and ate it thoughtfully. Cassie's still herself, she said, but quieter, watching, like she's waiting to see if this version of you is real. Oh, it's real, I said. And it's permanent. Ava laughed. Good, I like it. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a small box, handed it to me. What's this? Open it. Inside was a delicate bracelet. Silver, thin, with a single charm. A tiny apple. I wanted to get you something, she said shyly. For everything. For standing up. For reminding me I can too. I traced the charm with my finger. You didn't need to do this. I know, she said. But I wanted to. There it was again, the difference. Not obligation, not guilt. Just love. She helped me put it on. Her hands were steady now. When she left, I sat in the sun and let the bracelet catch the light. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't grand. It was real. And that was everything. That night, I opened my notebook, the same one where I had first written, October 3rd. Jason laughed. Philip called. I'm still the main account holder. And underneath it, I added, October 18th. Jason peeled apples. Cassie hung up. Ava brought muffins. I wore a bracelet that said more than words ever could. Then I closed the book and went to bed. It was a Tuesday when I finally stepped into the lawyer's office. Not because anything urgent required it, not because someone was pressuring me, but because I wanted the finality of it. I wanted the paperwork, the signatures, the click of the pen against a hard surface. I wanted the kind of closure that leaves no room for interpretation. The office was quiet. Wood-paneled walls, thick carpet, and the smell of paper and lemon cleaner. The receptionist offered me tea. I declined. I brought my own. The attorney, a calm man in his 50s named Mr. Halverson, had warm eyes and a no-nonsense manner. We'd met once before, after Harold passed. He remembered me. Mrs. Ellison, he said, standing. You look determined. That's accurate, I replied. We sat. He opened the folder I'd sent him 2 days earlier. My office reviewed your updates. The trust has been successfully reassigned. The will has been amended per your instructions. Jason Ellison and Cassandra Ellison are removed as legal beneficiaries. Ava J. Ellison is now sole inheritor and primary trustee of the educational fund, as well as the executor of your estate. I nodded. Good. There is also the option, he continued, to include a statement of intent, a brief paragraph, should your will ever be contested, clarifying your decision. Not legally necessary, but recommended. He slid a page across the desk. Blank, except for the header. Personal addendum to last will and testament. I picked up the pen, clicked it, and I wrote. To anyone who asks why I chose to leave my legacy in the hands of one young woman instead of the 2 adults who once called me mom and mother, I offer this. Ava never asked me to disappear. That is all. I signed it, folded it, and handed it back. Halverson didn't say much, just nodded, collected the document, and added it to the file. You've made clear decisions, he said. Yes, I said. Finally. That afternoon, back at home, I pulled out a small box I hadn't touched in years. Inside, the deed to the house, a few faded photos, and an envelope Harold once labeled, "For when it matters." I opened it. A letter. In his handwriting. Martha, if you're reading this, it means something has shifted. I won't pretend to know what. Life has a way of surprising even the most stubborn among us. But I do know you. I know you've always put others first, and I suspect that hasn't changed. I just want to remind you of something. This house? These accounts? These walls and documents and papers? They were never the legacy. You were. You, and the way you held everyone together long after they forgot you were doing it. So if there ever comes a time when you need to reclaim what's yours, do it without apology. Love, H. I folded it back with care, set it on the kitchen table. Then I sat down beside it, not to weep, not to ache, but to rest in the knowing. He had seen me, even when I didn't see myself. The next morning, I received a letter from the bank. One of those official envelopes with the thick stock paper and sharp folds. Inside, confirmation of all changes. Account holder, Martha E. Ellison beneficiary, Ava J. Ellison secondary. Authorization, none, trust. Active, Ellison Education Foundation. I placed the letter on top of Harold's note, and then, without hesitation, I opened a fresh page in my notebook and wrote, October 19th. The house is mine. The trust is secure. The power is quiet, but it's mine. I underlined that last part, not out of pride, but to remind myself, dignity doesn't roar. It doesn't demand a spotlight. It simply takes its seat at the table and does not ask to be excused. 2 days later, I went to the farmer's market. Not because I needed anything urgent. I had plenty of vegetables at home, and I wasn't hosting anyone. But it had been years since I'd walked those rows of stalls. Years since I let myself feel like a woman with time, not just responsibilities. I wore the good scarf, the one Ava gave me last Christmas, deep navy with embroidered edges. I don't know if anyone noticed, but I did. And that was enough. The vendors were mostly new, younger, louder. The woman who used to sell homemade soap was gone, replaced by someone offering vegan candles and bags made from reclaimed sails. A boy with a guitar played near the fountain. A group of college girls took photos of heirloom tomatoes. I walked slowly, letting the crowd move around me like water. At one stall, I bought pears. At another, fresh bread. Then I stood in line for honey and found myself behind a familiar figure, Mrs. Langley, from the church, though I hadn't been in a while. She turned, saw me, and lit up. Martha Ellison. My goodness, I haven't seen you in ages. I smiled politely. It's been a quiet season. I heard there was some trouble in the family, she said, lowering her voice like it was a secret anyone might overhear. With Jason and well, the finances. I didn't flinch. There was clarity. That's all. She blinked, then nodded, unsure of how to respond. I let her flounder in the silence. It wasn't cruelty. It was a boundary. After a moment, she recovered. Well, I always say, families are complicated. I'm sure things will settle down in time. They already have, I said, placing a jar of wildflower honey in my bag. I left her with her half-finished thoughts and made my way to the park bench near the exit, sat down, and watched the crowd. I saw a mother trying to calm a crying toddler, a man offering his wife the better half of a sandwich, a teenager rolling their eyes behind sunglasses. Life, carrying on. And for once, I didn't feel left out of it. I felt rooted. That evening, I called Rachel. I hadn't spoken to her in a few weeks, not since her letter. Rachel, I said, when she answered, I read your note, and I just wanted to say thank you. She smiled through the phone. I could hear it. You don't owe me thanks, Aunt Martha. I do, I said. You remembered me as I was. That matters more than you know. We talked for nearly an hour. Not about the drama, not about Jason or the trust or the past. Just about life. Her new apartment. Her attempts at cooking. Her bad dates. I laughed more than I had in months. You sound lighter, she said near the end. I put some things down, I replied. Turns out they weren't mine to carry. She was quiet a moment. I think you're becoming who you were always meant to be. No, I said softly. I think I'm just becoming who I used to be, before I forgot I had the right to stay her. After I hung up, I walked into the bedroom and opened the bottom drawer of the dresser. Inside was a photo album, one of the old ones, with yellowed plastic sheets and black corners holding the images in place. I flipped through slowly. Harold in the backyard, grinning over a half-built shed. Jason, at 9, riding a bike with a crooked helmet. Me, younger, hair windblown, holding a peach pie like I'd won a prize. Then one photo stopped me. It was of Jason, maybe 21, sitting at the kitchen table, head in hands, surrounded by papers. College applications, bills, a job rejection letter, and next to him, my hand on his back. Just my hand, caught in the frame. That hand had paid his tuition. That hand had written checks, made calls, packed lunches. That hand had signed away things she didn't want to give because someone had to hold the line. Now that hand held a pen that drew new lines. On documents, in hearts, around what was hers and what would never be taken again. I placed the album back, slowly, and went to the window. Outside, the wind moved through the trees, slow, steady, unbothered. And I whispered to the glass, I'm still here. Not for them, not against them. For me. It was a Sunday when Jason came back, not announced, not expected. Just a soft knock on the door while I was folding laundry in the living room. The kind of knock that says, I'm not sure I'll be welcomed, but I'm trying anyway. I opened the door and found him standing there with no boxes, no papers, no pretense. Just a brown paper bag in one hand. I brought lunch, he said, sheepishly. I studied him for a moment. He looked less polished. The lines in his face were clearer now. The forced confidence had softened. There was no arrogance in his posture, only hesitation. Are you hungry? He asked. I opened the door wider. Let's see what you brought. We sat in the kitchen like we hadn't in years. Not for holidays, not out of obligation, but just to be. He unpacked the bag. Turkey sandwiches, chips, a container of coleslaw from the deli downtown. You remembered, I said, nodding at the slaw. He smiled. You used to say it tasted like someone's grandmother still made it by hand. Because it does, I said. We ate mostly in silence, but it wasn't uncomfortable, not tight, just quiet, honest. At one point, he looked up from his plate. I read Ava's notebook, he said. The little one she's been writing in. I didn't respond. I just waited. She let me, he added quickly. Didn't sneak it. She said I should see what it looked like, how it felt, from your side of things. And did you? I asked. I did, he said quietly. It was hard. Good, I thought, but I didn't say it. She wrote about the bracelet, he said. And the apples, and the way you stood at the bank, steady as stone. She said you became the version of yourself she wished she'd met sooner. I swallowed. She said I made you small. I didn't correct her. She's right, Jason said. I did. I looked at him then. Really looked. For the first time in years, he wasn't trying to manage me. He was just being witnessed. Maybe for the first time in his life. I don't need an apology, I said. I need awareness. I need changed behavior. I'm working on it, he said. Not asking for anything. Just trying. We finished lunch without more talk. But as he stood to leave, he paused at the doorway. There's this picture, he said, of me in college, head down, overwhelmed. You were next to me, your hand on my back. I know the one. I didn't notice that hand until a week ago. It was just always there, you know? He looked at me then, eyes full. I should have said thank you a long time ago. You just did, I said. He stepped forward, gently wrapped his arms around me. It was the first hug that felt like his, not like habit. When he pulled away, I saw the shine in his eyes. He wasn't trying to hide. I'll come back soon, he said. You know where the porch is, I said, and the apple basket. He smiled, nodded, and left without closing the door too quickly. Later that day, I called Ava. Told you he's stubborn, I said. She laughed. He's also trying. That's new. Yes, I said. New can be good. You're proud of him? I thought for a moment. I'm proud of myself, I said. That's where it starts. That night, I sat in the living room with Harold's recipe journal in my lap. I flipped to the back where he used to scribble notes not tied to cooking. One page said, "People don't see what you do, but it shapes the ground they walk on." I underlined it in pencil. Then I added a line below, in my own hand. Eventually, they learn to walk with their own weight. Or they don't. Either way, you stop carrying them. I closed the book and placed it gently on the shelf. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like someone who had been left behind. I felt like someone who had arrived. Not somewhere loud. Not somewhere new. But somewhere solid. The last part came slowly. Not as a single event. Not as some grand reconciliation or collapse. Just a quiet settling. Like dust after the furniture's been moved. Like breath after a long-held tension. It was November now. The trees had surrendered their leaves without fuss, and I found myself spending more time on the porch, wrapped in my cardigan, listening to the wind talk to the bare branches. Sometimes Ava came by, sometimes Jason. Never together. And that was all right. We didn't need a perfect ending. We just needed truth. And a little peace. On the morning of my birthday, Ava arrived with a pie. Pear and ginger, slightly overbaked on one edge, proudly homemade. "I burned the crust," she said, holding it out like a trophy. "That's how you know it's made with love," I said, taking it from her hands. Jason showed up an hour later. No fanfare, no speech. Just a small envelope and the look of a man who understood he was a guest now, not the owner of the room. He handed me the card without a word. I opened it later, after he left. Inside, he'd written only one sentence. "Thank you for teaching me what you never owed me." I sat with that card in my lap for a long time. He was learning. That evening, after the sun dropped behind the trees and the house was warm with candlelight, I sat alone with a piece of Ava's pie and a cup of tea. I didn't feel lonely. I felt with myself. And that, after so many years of being scattered between needs and silences and compromises, was the greatest gift. I opened the notebook one last time, the same one I'd started when all this began, flipped to a fresh page, and wrote, November 4th. I am no longer quiet. I am no longer erased. I am no longer just Mom. I am Martha Ellison, and I am home. I closed the notebook for good. People talk about legacy like it's a thing you leave behind. Money. Property. Maybe a name carved into something solid. But that's not it. Legacy is what lives in people after you stop explaining yourself. It's the way Ava now pauses before she says yes to something that feels wrong. It's the way Jason no longer assumes he'll be handed what he hasn't earned. It's the way Rachel still calls just to hear my voice. It's the way I walk into the bank or the grocery store or my own kitchen and no longer feel like I owe anyone an apology for existing. That's legacy, and it's mine now. If you're reading this, maybe you're older. Maybe you've been called Mom more times than your own name. Maybe you've spent decades learning how to disappear politely. Maybe you've been laughed at for saying you still had something left. Let them laugh. And then walk into the room anyway. Because you know what I learned? They don't make the rules. Not about your money. Not about your silence. Not about your story. You do. So go ahead and say no. Go ahead and change your will. Go ahead and reclaim the seat they tried to pull out from under you. You are not cruel for protecting yourself. You are not bitter for remembering. You are not wrong for making them uncomfortable. You are a woman. and that is enough. If this story felt like yours, or if it reminded you of someone you love, someone who gave everything and asked for nothing, share it. Tell them you see them. Tell them they don't need permission to be whole. Leave a comment. Send a message. Pass it along. Because some truths are too important to whisper. And some women? They've waited long enough to be heard.